We're going to talk about genetics and genomics, which truly to me is one of the most fascinating sides of medicine. Understanding that genetic link between health and disease is fascinating to me. It will help us as nurses understand predisposition factors and help us be better able to specifically teach to each patient. And I think you're going to hear about this field as more and more as the future unfolds. It's a fascinating area, so get ready. Genetics, as you know, is the scientific study of heredity, and it is how specific traits or predispositions are transmitted from parents to offspring. Genetics, as you know, I know you know this, is comprised of the chromosomes, which contain genetic material which is lined up in a linear fashion within each chromosome. Each gene is a unit of heredity and is composed of a segment of DNA. This DNA is basically a set of instructions. It's the instruction manual for the protein functions in the body. And individual variances occur as a result of differences in any of these genetic messages. So my set of instructions is different than your set of instructions. And what is that little stinker protein thing that we just mentioned? The purpose of a gene is to code for the making of a specific protein used by a cell, tissue, or organ within a person. So that's what the gene does. It's to code every part of our system at the very basic level to function. If a client lacks this genetic code to turn on the protein, thus preventing its use by the cell, disease ensues. An example is insulin. If a client lacks the gene whose job it is to turn on that protein called insulin, that client will have diabetes. Other protein examples are hemoglobin, angiotensin, and estrogen. So got it? You got to have the protein turn on code. If they don't have it, they'll have the disease. And that is all you need to know about the genetic influence on our health. Basically, our health is, at its most basic level, dependent on the genetic structure of each of our cells. Which ones have the necessary proteins to do their job, and which ones are permanently locked for some reason. But does it end there? Absolutely not. This is where genomics enters that health picture. Genomics is the study of the multifactorial aspect of what affects our health. So our genetic makeup gives information regarding what health challenge each of us is most susceptible to as we age. So it is not just the genetic aspect, it is also the environmental and lifestyle aspects. So it all really is interdependent. There is what's called the Human Genome Project, and this shows how basic human genetics is to human development, health, and disease. Genomics is the study of the interaction of genes with other genes and environmental factors. An example would be genetic testing, which can identify those who have BRCA1 or BRCA2 genetic mutations. Genomics takes this to the next level and promotes early identification of the genetic potential for breast cancer and provides early detection and screening in those high-risk individuals, as well as assists the client with prevention taking decisions. In other words, some women who test positive for either BRCA1 or BRCA2 may elect to have a mastectomy rather than worry about getting breast cancer, or they may elect to have much more closer monitoring of their breasts and their breast health status. Another example is the father of a teenager who's known to have hypercholesterolemia, and he takes medication to help lower his cholesterol. Genetics causes this teenager to be at an increased risk for hypercholesterolemia when he's an adult. Genomics provides for early detection of this potential future risk and performs cholesterol screening on this youth earlier than we would on someone who does not have that family history potential. We also would educate him about his increased risk, provide prevention information, what forms of nutrition will help, what exercise will help prevent hypercholesterolemia as he gets older, and of course warn him of his increased risk if he decides to smoke or engage in other heart-challenging behaviors. So this knowledge is power. Of course, you're dealing with a teenager, so we do have to understand that they tend to think they were going to live forever. So there's more than just this, but understand that this is something that we can help work with people on. Without genomics, this teenager would have been an already affected adult by the time his problem was discovered. So, and if he doesn't, if he does not heed the advice and the recommendations and the teaching that we do, he won't be surprised when he gets this problem as an adult. But hopefully we can make a difference. That's the point. What other diseases or conditions can genomics identify in a client and thus help him reduce his potential to develop or at least minimize the effect of? Just think of some other things. Think of your own family. What diseases or conditions do you see in your family history that makes you aware I need to do this or that to help minimize my own risk? Here are a few: diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, and arthritis. What counseling would the nurse provide to each of these clients? Think of that as you consider predisposition teaching, helping them prevent the occurrence or at least minimize the severity of if it does happen. An example, predisposition teaching for diabetes. We want to help that client avoid obesity, exercise wisely, get early glucose screenings. What else would we do? What else could we do? Teach the symptoms to watch for so that it can be caught early if they do develop it, in spite of the best teaching and the best practices personally. And then on your own, think of other things for heart disease. You tell me, you think about them. What does predisposition teaching for people who have that possibility of heart disease? Cancer. What are all those cancer risk factors? You're going to learn more about those in the oncology unit here, but think about that. What do you know now? And then Alzheimer's. That's kind of a toughie, but there are best practices to help avoid that. And you might want to do some research and figure out what you can do to help a person who's got a family history of that. And the age, is it a 50-year-old or a 90-year-old? Different. How do we know who's at risk and therefore who to test further? Do we test everybody 100%? Nope, that would not be an economically wise thing to do. So we look at that family history. Whoop, boom, monkeys in the tree. I love that little thing. Oh, well, sorry, I digress. Pharmacogenomics. This is a fascinating, fascinating field, and I think we're going to get more into this, hopefully, because if we can take a medication that works excellently, why take one that doesn't work so well? Right now we have pharmacies giving only medications that insurance companies allow them to give based on. I'm hoping at some point it changes so that we are allowed to get the medications that are best utilized for each individual person. Many drugs are highly host dependent. In other words, the client's response to the medication is highly dependent on their own predisposition to how they process the medication. And those of you, example, birth control pills. As a midwife, I have women that were perfect on this birth control pill, and this one over here never worked. My goal would be to give her the one that worked best. Then we get the insurance companies in, and they are cutting costs and all that. So she's forced to take the one less acceptable to her body. Then you do all this writing and getting them to approve a medication that's not on their formulary. It's kind of a backward system, and it's kind of annoying actually when you're a healthcare provider, because you want to do what's best for your patient, not what's cheapest for the insurance company. But economics does play a role. Knowing these medications is necessary to knowing how to best prescribe for any individual client. An example of these highly host-dependent meds are warfarin, tricyclic antidepressants, and vitamin K. And this list is expected to grow as research continues. On a personal level, I'll make this quick, but on a personal level, I was offered to have genomic testing on myself, and with the list of meds that I was currently on, one of them being hypertensive. I don't need to give you my personal history, but medications that I was on, and they did the genomic study. You get a saliva sample and send it to the lab, and several weeks later I got a list of medications, which ones I was on that were the best for my genetic makeup and which ones they recommended to switch. And I took that list to my primary care provider, and she was game, and so she switched me to the medications that, according to my genomics testing, would work better for me. And now, I don't know if, I feel fine. I'm doing good, so I don't know if it makes a difference, but if my body says it makes a difference, I'm good with that. Then I got the bill. Now, the bill I didn't have to pay, thank God, because it was a complimentary test, but the bill was over $3,000. So it is not economically feasible to test everybody at this time. The nurse's role in genomics is to recognize your own attitude and beliefs regarding genetic and genomic science. Do you buy into it? Do you find that it's valid, or are you a skeptic? Advocate for genetic and genomic services. The more people can have more specifically focused medication and therapy regimes, I would think that would make them a much healthier individual. Incorporate genetic and genomic technologies and information into your own practice. Again, that teaching of your patients. Demonstrate an ability to personalize genetic and genomic information and services. How does it impact the patient sitting in front of you at that particular moment? And then provide autonomous, informed genetic-related and genomic-related decision-making. Help the patient understand how they can better improve their own outcome in the health field just by making better decisions. Integrate and apply genetic and genomic knowledge to nursing assessment. Keep it in mind that that's going to help focus where you need to teach. Identify those clients who may benefit from specific genomic resources, services, or technologies. Not everyone will need to have that expensive test, but there may be some that it's really would play an important role in helping them attain their best health. In my situation, it wouldn't have been economically feasible because I didn't notice a specific difference, but someone else might. Okay, say an antidepressant, they were on the wrong antidepressant, and mine did get changed, and I do feel better, so maybe it helped. I don't know. Facilitate referrals for genetic and genomic services, and then provide education, care, and support related to these services. Oh boy, what about the adopted client? Yes, there are adopted people that do not have they don't have a family history. What is their impact on their personal health? What we do with these patients is look at overall health practices and see what you kind of generalize. If they're not exercising, everybody should exercise. So we'll talk to them in that manner. What changes need to occur to minimize this potentially negative impact on the health of those adopted members of our population? Should they be at least given their family history, their genetic family history at the time of adoption? The genetic counseling across the lifespan, let's look at that. Prenatal counseling, that's when it first is introduced to most people when they get married and decide to have babies, and now they're worried about whatever is in their family that their child may have. Newborn screenings are done on everybody. Every newborn gets a test. I don't even know how many there are now. There used to be 3, now there's like 7 and probably 12 and more. I honestly can't remember, but PKU is one of them. They screen for potential for diabetes in the far future was a study they were doing. So that's where they pick the little heel of the newborn and fill these circles on a card, and that gets sent off to test for several genetic linked diseases to help minimize long-term effects by early treatment. Pediatric population would benefit, and as well as the adolescents and adults. Consider your role in each of these groups. Remember that every parent anticipates a perfect child, and every adolescent expects that his or her biggest concern is going to be clothing and hairstyle. They're not going to think about hypertension when they're 40. That's not where their head is at. So we've got to be realistic is what I'm saying. What about the adult who now faces awareness of impaired fertility perhaps, or has learned she tests positive for BRCA1, or one learns that Alzheimer's is in the future? These are all important not only for our patients, but for ourselves. We each have concerns of our own health, just as we can have concerns for others. What can we do to help these clients through these storms, these concerns? How can we help ourselves? In conclusion, we will briefly discuss economics and genomics and their interplaying role. With the increased cost of healthcare and the cost-saving measures that primary healthcare can provide as opposed to tertiary care. Remember, that's going into the hospital. Once they're in the hospital, those healthcare dollars get burned up fast. So if we can keep them out of the hospital, the importance of genomics cannot be emphasized enough. So yes, it's a $3,000 test, but should some patients have that test done if it would help do early detection and prevention of disease? Absolutely. I think $3,000 test is, you spend that one day in a hospital. So yes, it does have a role, and I think we need to further, as a healthcare community, it needs to be further defined where to do this type of testing, and with time that costs do go down, as we know. So that, I think would be a good way to spend some money on certain individuals if they take a screening test and find they're at high risk. Imagine the impact on our society should we be better able to prevent those worst case scenarios. Not only would we be saving healthcare dollars, which is important, but we would also, more importantly, be saving our people, our citizens, our families, our neighbors, ourselves, and that's priceless. So I hope you enjoy the genomics aspect. Just really consider it as you go into practice and understand the role that understanding that cellular level of health has to play in keeping us healthy as a whole body system.